Hey, what is going on everybody, and welcome to Fantasia. For today, we're going to be jumping into another session of Epic 7. Now today, we have another account overview for you guys, and this one is going to showcase all of my units and their gear as per usual. Now, if you want a list of all of these units, screenshots of all of their stats, then please feel free to join the Discord. Link is going to be in the description down below, where you can go ahead and check the album out in the Epic 7 channel. Now, another way that you can go and jump straight to your favorite units is by going down to the description or the pinned comments and clicking on the timestamp for those units. So use Control F, find your favorite unit, and check them out. So with that being said, guys, let's go ahead and jump right into this, shall we? So starting off, we're just going to go in elemental order, because that is usually how my units are sorted. We're starting off with Holiday Yufine. So Holiday Yufine here, I really only use her as like a Basar counter in like arena matches. I don't really see Basar being drafted very often anymore, even in RTA. And in those situations, I might draft Holiday Yufine along with Lilias as like a little counter for him. But these are her stats right here. She's pretty bulky, and her damage is quite low, although I did opt to give her a crit chance necklace so that she can at least deal consistent damage rather than, you know, going for more attack but no crit chance. So you can see her stats here. She's really just built to sustain, and she's on her own artifact here, Champion's Trophy, for the additional added effect of like a pseudo dizzy where she can stun with her S1. Alright, so that's going to be it for Holiday Yufine right there. Next off, we have Ken. So Ken is a bruiser that I like to draft in RTA quite often, especially when the opponent is starting to tank up a bit, and using units that I typically have a harder time, you know, cleaving. Units like Ruele or FCC and such. But you know, he does have a weakness against ice units, so I typically won't draft him if the opponent's using, like, you know, Krau, Seaside Bellonas, and things like that. He's built to sustain a little bit because he's on Sigret's Scythe. Obviously not max limit broken because I don't have enough copies, at least for this one here. But it does help him when he gets low to help heal himself back up if there's no healer. If you do have a healer, maybe Draco Plate is something that you want to look into. Alright, next up we have Lilias. So Lilias is a fantastic unit for me, especially because I use her as a support, and I love bringing her, if you guys watch my Guild Wars, I love bringing her with Dizzy or Charles, just because the stuff she enables with other units' S1 skills is absolutely insane. So she's on immunity and speed here, and she's really just meant to go and cleanse my team before, you know, my main DPSs go and take their turns. She has a little bit of effectiveness for the provokes. Usually I try to counter draft her into things like Falconer Kluri, so it is pretty useful for me to have some way to control Kluri there in that regard. She is running Aureus, which I really do like because her S2 giving her a shield actually helps her with sustainability, so she's actually quite strong in terms of just soaking up damage from my other units. I used to run her on Adamant Shield, but I switched over to Aureus just because I like having that utility there. Next off, we have Kayron, and oh my god, did he get a makeover. So, no longer is he on free destruction gear, but look at these beautiful stats going on. So this was made possible by this one chess piece that I rolled, which was actually quite insane. All the pieces on him are really good, actually. Like this one right here, 39% crit damage is what enabled this build. Otherwise, I would never have reached 292 crit damage on my Kayron here. So he is meant to destroy tanky comps, right? I like to draft him into teams that are kind of like bulky, semi-tanky, right? People like to first pick ML Kraus and things like that. So I have him on Aaliyah's Knife. He cuts through people's defenses, high defense units, things like Ruele, things like ML Krau, and stuff like that. He's also really great for anti-cleave, so I like to bring him against people who are trying to cleave me, just because he can survive, he's guaranteed to with his immortality, and then you can just, you know, Soulburn and S1 and wipe everything out, because they're usually quite squishy. So there we go, that's my Kayron right there. Next off we have Lidica. Now, I used to have Lidica on some pretty insane gear. She was around like 270 something speed, but slowed her down here with a very casual build. She's not really meant to go first or anything, but she still is a great unit to control and lock down specific threats on the opponent's team, as long as they're not ice element. So Lidica here, I don't really draft her into RTA, but I do like bringing her into Guild Wars. It's actually quite fun. Be able to control like a unit on the opponent's team, constantly pushing them back, never letting them get a turn, is actually something that happens quite often. Is even at this speed here, which is quite low, 234 speed. I have her on Miss Confeel right here, mostly for the extra utility of being able to defense break. She already brings so much to the table in terms of debuffs that yeah, she is quite a good utility unit. Yep, but there she is. I don't really use her in RTA, but occasionally in lower rank battles, I might bring her in for fun. Alright, here's my Melissa. Now, she used to be quite fast, around 210 speed. However, I've slowed her down here and brought back more offensive stats. She's on leftover gear because I don't really bring her into RTA. I use her in Guild Wars against Revenant Violets, and that's pretty much it. She is really good, actually, against Violet and Arbiter Vildred comps, where they run both of them together on the defense, because you can S3 into the Violet, kill them off, and then S2 into the Arbiter Vildred. I usually bring something like a Angelica and an Oxlots with her in those situations, so she just 2-for-1s everything, and yeah, you're left with a 3v1 situation. So she's on Oath Key for the reason that I use her to counter Violet. Oath Key counters Moonlight Dreamblade, which is a very popular artifact on Violet. So having Oath Key here is a really great way for me to ensure that I'm never going to miss. Alright, so that's going to be it for the Melissa right here. Next off, we have our Researcher Carrot. Yeah, that's right. I revamped her build, actually, with the last Free on Equip event. As you can see here, she is quite bulky, and she is significantly faster. So she's still on speed and immunity set, and she's still on Proof of Valor. But what you're going to notice is that her bulk went up, her speed went up, because I am actually considering using her in sort of a pseudo cleave. Now, she has 50 effectiveness, which is good enough, right? 50 effectiveness is good enough against most DPS units who might have an off chance of having like 20 to 30, effect resistance or whatever. And that doesn't impact anything, right? Obviously, you're not going to be landing your burns on 150 plus effect resist units, but that was never the point with using her. She's really tanky and like just absolutely insane with her passive, allowing her a huge shield and giving her a cleanse as well. Proof of Valor here just ensures that she's able to survive, and because of that, she's actually pretty decent in bruiser comps as well. As long as the opponent doesn't bring ice units like Seaside Bellona and such, and yeah, they don't have too many cleanse units on their team, then Carrot is a very, very viable option. Okay, next up we have Achates right here, and Achates, very simple build, just on some leftover HP and immunity gear. I don't really use her all that often, and I only really pretty much use her in Guild War comps with Dark Corvus. So she's here as a cleanser, as a sustain unit for that comp. She has pretty decent defensive stats all around, and 180 something speed is good enough for what she does, especially because she can give herself invincibility for a whole turn every other turn. Her effect resistance is quite low. It's only at 100 something percent. I would love to build an effect res Achates where she has over 200% resistance, and I could just bring her against crowd control comps in RTA. But crowd control comps are so rare as of right now that I don't think that that's going to be too big of a threat. If things like Cerise and Emil Ball and such make a huge resurgence, MLR, Mintha and stuff, then I'm going to consider building her with a bunch of effect res, especially because her EE here allows her to get an effect res buff for 2 turns, so 50% more effect res on top of, let's say 200 effect res. 250 will be good enough to negate 150% effectiveness on those debuff units. Rod of Amaryllis for the additional healing on her S2 and S3, and it really, really does help her out. It's probably the best artifact that you can run on her. Alright, so moving on to another fire healer we have here, Tamarinne. So Tamarinne I really only use for PvE now. Her stats here aren't the best, but hey, they work. She's on immunity with speed, and honestly, she's amazing for expeditions, for raids, for Labyrinth, right? She's so good for every single PvE content. Things like Abyss, things like, what is that one thing called? The Hall of Trials, that's what it is. Happens every 2 weeks, right? So she is fantastic for that as well. I have her on Wonders a Potion Vial because I've been using her quite extensively in the new hunt that came out, trying to cleanse stuns off of my units. So that's there for that. But yeah, she works on several different artifacts. I just have her on this. I swap her around on artifacts quite a bit. Touch of Rekos is something I use fairly often on her as well. But yeah, pretty basic PvE build here. Okay, moving on, we have Luna. She's also, as you can tell, on spare gear. However, she works. Oh yeah, she works. So just on a simple free destruction gear and some blue crit pieces, that's right, she puts in a ton of work. Soulburn S3, after getting boosted by Oxlots, pretty much one-shots any unit in the game that's not a dedicated tank, right? And I have had instances where she's one-shot Kraus and one-shot FCCs. It is not very hard to do. As you can tell, 50% main attack stat boot, right? Not even optimal in terms of her stats. On a plus 15 portrait, could definitely have much more damage if this was a plus 30 portrait, but again, it's just overkill because of how strong she is. Then again, I do have her at plus 15, so there is that. Her exclusive artifact is actually fantastic here, getting the extra turn, at least how I use her. I usually nuke a unit and then use her S1 into another one, and she's typically strong enough to go ahead and actually take out 2 units in a single turn. So it's pretty strong, and you can actually use her as an Arbiter Vildred counter in that regard as well. But yeah, there we go. That's my Luna. Moving on, we have the Queen of Wyvern here. We have Sigret, and Sigret, her stats right here, purely offensive, purely for Wyvern. 85% crit chance because she gets 15% due to elemental advantage against the Wyvern, and she's on a combination of crit and hit pieces here. And the reason for that is because I like using her as an additional debuffer against the Wyvern. All of her bleed stacks and all that stuff do add up, and it helps to boost the damage on her S3, which is very nice. So here are her pieces. I mean, most of this stuff is fairly garbage, right? I don't really put too many of my optimal DPS pieces onto my Wyvern units, but hey, it works. My Wyvern runs are very consistent, and it's good enough. She's on Daydream Joker over here, and I believe, yeah, she's on the EE that allows her to activate her S1 off of her S2 when there's 75% health remaining rather than 50. Alright, moving on here, we have Krau. Oh yeah, that's right. He is such a good unit. I absolutely love him, and I use him everywhere in PvP. I've been drafting him more in RTA whenever people tend to draft tanky units against me, especially when they first pick ML Kraus, and I don't necessarily feel like taking a gamble against him with Cleave. I will take away their Ice Krau, right? So I have him built, and he is very strong. 152 effect res, which means he's not going to get debuffed by your standard DPS units, which is very nice. He's on Aureus. I do need to plus 30 this one here to help with damage mitigation. His defense buff also helps my team a lot. And you guys know how much I love Krau's horse. Just running over people for absolutely no reason. Okay, so yeah, there he is. Pretty standard build in my opinion. So nothing too special there. But speaking of special though, we do have another Ice Knight joining the ranks. We have Rose over here, and she has her her skill 3 Max Molad, right? I haven't really been talking about Molas too much because you can see them on your screen, but it's really important to point out that this is really important. The 25% combat readiness versus the original 15 that she has is really strong. So her gear here is just garbage random gear that I have, right? I say that, but then you see the I-90 pieces. These are just random I-90 pieces that are left over that none of my other units could really fit onto them, as you can see. This is 19 speed, but it's on a random HP set. and none of my other units can really utilize that very well. This is a crit set piece with with HP main stat here, but it rolled well into speed, which is pretty nice. And then we have a couple of pieces over here that are not like, you know, absolutely amazing or anything, but they work. So her defensive stats are really strong. She's actually really good at protecting other units with her S2. And also, I've been running the new buffed Bastion of Perlucia artifact, which has actually been very, very nice because I use her in Cleave, which means the DPS that I bring is typically fairly squishy. So at the start of the battle, they get a huge barrier, plus they get immunity because they're usually the unit with the highest attack. So that is very nice. She has her EE here, which gives her 10 speed, which is pretty good, and decreases the cooldown of her S3 by a turn, which is fairly nice. She's able to S3 very, very quickly. I think it's on a 3-turn cooldown. Alright, yeah, so that's my Rose. Very simple, doesn't need effectiveness or effect res. I just built her completely for speed to push up my team, and has a bit of bulk to go along with it. Okay, next up we have Karin. So Karin here, fantastic unit for Wyvern, absolutely love her. And as you can tell, she's just on some random free pieces, right? Again, as you can see, I don't really dedicate too much of my resources into PvE, especially because I'm not able to farm Wyvern and stuff 24/7 like a lot of whales and stuff do. So, you know, I'm just here chilling with whatever leaves I have, and if I need to run Wyvern, I'll just put it on some repeat for a little bit. So here are the substats. I mean, these are all free pieces of gear, nothing too special, right? Except this. This rolled pretty well into effectiveness, which is bringing her up to 70%. She's a dedicated debuffer on my team, so that's why she's running Torn Sleeve, which has a 75% chance to inflict bleed for 2 turns. And because she attacks so often and her speed is decent, she's able to get enough debuffs on the Wyvern so that he's able to maintain his attention on my front line. But yeah, there she is. Don't really use her in PvP at all, but she is actually a pretty strong unit. I would like to build her for PvP one day, but that means I would need to find a new dedicated debuffer. Okay, moving on though, we have Ice Kise over here, one of my new favorite DPS units to use, and man, is she absolutely amazing. So here are the stats, and I know a lot of you guys are probably here because you checked out my RTA debut video of her, and she is pretty fast. I built her to go first in terms of doing damage, right? She'll usually get a speed buff from Angelica against Arby's, or she'll get like a push from Rose or something like that. Her gear isn't amazing. I'm having a very difficult time building fast DPS units, which is why you see my Melissa got stripped of her gear from previous account overviews, mostly because I needed to spread that gear around to some other units. She is on plus 30 portrait, which helps her with sniping, right? You pretty much want to get that one-shot kill with her S3, so she's able to do that very consistently against, you know, squishier units like Arbiter Vildreds and stuff. But she's actually pretty decent at sniping units like Seaside Bellona as well, right? Ones that aren't built as complete dedicated bruisers. You can definitely snipe down pretty easily. So there's my Kise. Absolutely love using her. Traded a little bit of attack for some more crit damage. I think in the RTA debut video she had like 3,900 attack and like 245 crit damage, but as you can see the stats have altered a little bit, but not too significantly. Alright, next up we have Flan. Oh my god, yeah. If you guys watched that summoning video, we went in hard, as you can see. SSS imprint. Now, some of you guys might be wondering, well, Azalea, you summoned like 4 Flans in that video. Correct, I did. And then off screen, off recording, I actually went back and summoned a few more. So, got her max imprinted because I really love her design. She's a really good unit. And she's actually been proving to be super strong as well. Some people definitely have underestimated her, saying that she's not as good as Tywin, but man, does she bring such good utility to the team. So really built her for speed and effectiveness. As you can tell, this is not optimal in terms of the gear that she has. I mean, I'm using a level 67 chest piece for crying out loud, and a level 70 scarf here for the necklace. But went for speed and effectiveness, went for bulk as well. I did want her to survive. I know some people just have her really squishy, but I do prefer bulk on my support units. As you can tell, this boot isn't even refined here, or reforged, so I can get even faster speeds on her. I just choose not to. I'm keeping her at around 250 because she needs to be slower than some of my strippers, and one of my main strippers, especially against FCC comps, is going to be Broman, and because Broman needs to go before her, I can't have her speed RNGing my Broman and accidentally taking the first turn. Alright, so there we go. That's Flan right there. Pretty good stuff. She's on her own artifact, which is very nice, bringing a pseudo Tagahel's Ancient Book here with 10 souls after her defense break. Actually lets me go ahead and do some insane damage, because you can soul burn your DPS that goes after her. So things like Arbiter Vildred's S3, right? Landy for an extra turn and things like that. Very, very strong artifact. Okay, moving on, we have Seaside Bellona. So Seaside Bellona here, she actually has an imprint because I randomly pulled an extra green Bellona from daily summons, but here are her stats right here. She actually should be on drink right here. So if I switch her over, you'll see these would be her stats under drink. She's on Daydream Joker if I ever bring her into Wyvern. She's just kind of a pseudo semi DPS on Wyvern. Not really there for too much, but the target debuff does help. She's on pretty much free gear, right? Absolute free gear here. Lifesteal set with immunity. You can get these chest pieces from Hellraid, and this one really, really bad. look at these substats. Such a bad necklace there, but it works. It works. It gives her the bulk she needs. It gives her the crit chance to reach 100%, and we're off to the races, right? She's here as a really strong unit in PvP against things like Rylets, against things like Ruele, FCCs, right? Any fire unit, really. And she's actually pretty good against tank comps, too. You just gotta watch out for ML Kraus. Those kind of hurt quite a bit. But yeah, nothing too special here. And again, I swap the artifacts depending on what I use her for. So next up we have Dizzy. So Dizzy here, I think in the last video I actually put her on a speed and effectiveness build because my counter sets were all over the place, but decided to go back and re-gear Dizzy with counter pieces. So she's on counter immunity, and here are her stats. Very bulky, 1,500 defense, almost 18,000 health, pretty decent speed for a counter. And we have a little bit of effectiveness here. 70% is good enough to debuff majority of DPS units, which is pretty much what I'm going to use her for. You're not really going to be going for too many debuffs on dedicated healers, right? In fact, if you're bringing Dizzy against dedicated healers, it's probably going to be a bit of an issue. You're going to get cleansed, you're going to get healed. Dizzy won't be able to keep up in terms of contributing damage all that much. But she's on Aela Violin because she's a support unit here in terms of stripping buffs from my opponent. So she's very good in that regard, and the counter set is actually really strong in terms of controlling the enemy team as well. You get the random stuns from her S1s as well. Very good. Alright, so moving on, we have a unit that I use very often in PvE, which is going to be Luluca. So Luluca over here, I've changed up her stats quite a bit. She doesn't have all that much crit chance anymore, lowered her crit damage, increased her attack, and increased her bulk. So I use Luluca a lot in raids and in expeditions. So one thing is that I like to play those on auto. And because I auto those modes, it is, essential that my units survive. Because the AI will be dumb sometimes and not do what it's supposed to do. And in that regard, I upped her bulk so she survives. I actually changed up my Commander Lorina as well to help with survival. But she does have a bit of effectiveness. She's on Midnight Bloom to help support the team with crit chance. And her EE here is for an additional S1 attack, which is it procs quite a bit. This is basically the skill that they gave ML Luluca, right? ML Luluca has this built into her S1, but Luluca can achieve it through her EE. And I actually find this EE to be much more fun and much more effective than her S3 one, which gives her attack down. But, it all depends on the situations. Alright, moving on here, we have Angelic Montmorancy, and absolutely amazing healer and cleanser, but I don't really use her all too often. She's really used in PvE for me, at least. I don't really bring her into PvP, so as you can tell, she's on the not most ideal gear. And all the substats on these aren't that great either, like missing speed on chest pieces, using a level 67 necklace, alright, 78 ring. So she works on these substats. There's nothing, nothing too crazy here that's going on. Her effect res could definitely be higher. I would definitely love to have, either a 200 effect res Achates or a 200 effect res Momo for like a dedicated cleanser against debuffers. But with these stats, she is perfectly usable, and she's on Rod of Amaryllis to help her with her heals. Yep, so that's pretty much it for Montmorancy. Next up, we have Diene. So Diene over here is, man, I've been phasing out using her because ML Krau is drafted so much in RTA, but her defensive stats are very solid. I would love her speed to be higher, but honestly, it works at 220. She goes before all of my DPS, and most of the opponent's units, DPS units, are slower than 220, so that's not going to be a huge issue there. 150 effect res, which has been very nice in terms of protecting her from getting stripped, although Basar does say hello. But yeah, true damage from units like ML Haste and ML Krau have really hurt Diene's viability. I loved drafting Diene with Alencia. They are such a good combo to have. But recently, kind of been phasing out of using her, although I do keep her geared because whenever I do bring her to bruiser fights, she is so essential. Rod of Amaryllis to actually give her S3 and S2 some healing abilities there. But yeah, otherwise, pretty standard Diene in my opinion. Moving on, we have Alencia, the one that I was just talking about earlier, and oh my god, is she absolutely insane. So here she is with her stats. Very bulky in terms of defense and HP, and pretty mediocre speed. I chose to go not go for speed boots. I went for HP boots, mostly because I don't really need to bring her super fast. The units that she usually wants to strip buffs from are probably going to be going before 170 speed, right? So I want my opponents to go first, buff first, things like Krau, things like, Adventurer Raz, right? Those defensive buffs, or maybe, you have dedicated attack buffers and things like that. Maybe the opponent has a DN, right? You want your Alencia to go afterwards so you can strip those buffs. Now, her damage seems to be quite lacking here, right? She doesn't scale off attack. She actually does very well with HP scaling. But her crit damage is made up with the Draco Plate I have here at plus 30, so it gives an extra 30% crit damage. Also helps her nullify some crit damage as well, which is pretty good. So yeah, there we go. That's the Alencia. A little bit of effectiveness to help strip. Obviously, when you proc Mind's Eye also gives you some stats as well, so it's pretty good. Alright, so moving on here from Alencia, we have Lilibet, and this Lilibet actually is just on some spare pieces that I don't really have a use for at the moment, as you can tell by the level 70 necklace here, but these offensive stats are actually enough to still snipe down Arbiter Vildreds. I've never really used Lilibet as a fast DPS, because again, I'm lacking a lot of speed on my DPS pieces, but with Oxlots pushing her up and giving her attack buff, and being able to just soul burn her S3, which has such insane multipliers, she's able to cut down Arbiter Vildred through FCC shields, Aureus, and the like, so it's no problem whatsoever. She's on Portrait for that little bit of extra damage just to squeeze out of that Arbiter Vildred, just in case he's a little on the bulkier side. But again, yeah, very solid Extinction unit. I would love to build her faster, and I'd love to build her stronger, but as of right now, she does her job. Okay, so moving on, we have Mercenary Helga. She hasn't really been seeing a ton of use. However, Speed Imprint is very nice, along with an attack buff on her S3. The effectiveness buff actually is pretty nice, and I'm trying to think of ways that I can use her in that regard, the effectiveness buff, with some weird trolly Broman comps. But anyway, with that aside, she's actually rocking a bunch more speed than she used to, 232. I lowered her bulk by quite a bit, but she's still bulky enough to withstand a few hits. So her gear here, really spare stuff, right? Helmet and chest pieces are not even 85s. A lot of random, as you can see, random pieces on immunity just to get that set in, just so she can't get debuffed before she gets to put up her attack and effectiveness buff. She's over here on Alencinox's Wrath, and really for no other reason than I couldn't get her to 50% crit chance. She does give herself a crit chance buff if she's at full health at the start of her turn. and her S2 allows her to extend her buffs, but I found it to be more reliable, especially with this lower health threshold, to have just a consistent way of getting crit chance over time. And usually she's not the main focus of the opponent, but she has defense breaks in her kit, and she adds a lot of utility to the team. I do draft her sometimes quite a bit for the speed imprint, although I built a new speed imprint that you guys will see in just a bit. So she used to be for speed imprints, now I pretty much use her in Arena to boost speed and to buff attack. But yeah, pretty solid unit. I just wish that they give her like a little CR push or something on her S3 to make it just a little bit more viable compared to some of the other attack buff units that are out there like Rose. Alright, moving on though, we have Yufine over here, absolute insane nuker, and she is rocking crit damage with crit chance. So her attack, you know, almost 4,000 attack, pretty solid. I went for more bulk on her because I liked her. She's built super slow, right? I usually bring her in with something like Crimson Armin and like an attack buffer, like a Diene or something like that, or an Oxlots. So with that in mind, I like having a little bit of survivability, because with Aureus on Crimson Armin, Yufine will be able to survive a few hits if she does get countered or something like that. Her crit chance is fairly low, but we do have Hellcutter, which I'll show you in just a bit, as her artifact, and her crit damage is sitting pretty high. So almost max crit damage there. I actually lowered it. It used to be max, but I didn't really need that extra crit damage in favor of a ton more attack. So gave her a bunch more attack in favor of that. So it rounds out. Here's her artifact, Hellcutter. Because she's so slow and because I usually bring like Crimson Armin, the opponent's units will cycle before her, giving her 100% crit chance before she even gets the chance to go. Also gives her a little boost to her attack stat, which is kind of nice. The EE that I'm running here didn't even bother for max EE, the effect here, the main stat, because effectiveness really doesn't matter on Yufine. Whatever she hits is going to die anyway, so I just opted to go for the one where we have more attack whenever we use our S1. Alright, so there we go. Next up is Charles. So Charles's gear has not changed. He is pretty much finished at this point for me, unless I want to swap his build around and make him faster or something like that. But he has been very, very solid in terms of his performance. Love bringing him in auto comp for Arena. I love drafting him into RTA, especially against people who have a bunch of AoEs, right? Like to punish AoEs. Yeah, otherwise, very solid. Counter immunity, very slow. Just sits there, continuously procs Elbrus, continuously procs his S1s into S2s. such a clutch unit, right? And yeah, there's his EE for the additional chance of proccing S2 from his S1. And he's rocking his new costume as well. Alright, moving on here, we have Falconer Kluri, who I actually ended up re-gearing several times, even in the last few days, during the last free unequip we had, just shifting so many pieces of gear around. So she's much faster now than she was before. She used to be much faster than this. She used to be at her peak, I think like 270 something speed, but I had her at like 250, 255 just a couple days ago, but I dropped about 20 speed on her, got a bit more bulk, and got a lot more effectiveness. How I use her is I usually open up with her to defense break a unit so that I can snipe them with Kise. Now, what happened was, after I built Rose and after I built Flan, I didn't really have the need for that anymore, right? Although, one thing that Kluri does bring is that she's a stripper, which is really good. She can strip the opponent's immunity and give them defense break, whereas Flan cannot strip, but she does have an AoE defense break. So with Falconer Kluri nowadays, I like to draft her with an Aureus user. So I like to draft her with Lilias to make sure my opponent can't pick Lilias to counter me, or I draft her with someone like Krau, or even Rose sometimes. Rose is a great opener, boosting up Falconer Kluri. Falconer Kluri defense breaks something, and then I can potentially cleave, right? So with that in mind, I like to bring Adamant Shield on her to complement the Aureus users. In that regard, decreasing crit hit damage, as well as the other user obviously soaking up a bit of the damage really helps, and Kluri's passive healing is pretty nice for sustain as well. Alright, next up we have Celine here. Celine being a fantastic user now that her EE is out, right? We'll get to that in just a bit though. My stats are not looking too great, right? I wish she had more bulk, but then again, I haven't I-90'd any of my pieces here, and all of my pieces tend to just have random effect res stats and just random effectiveness stats, right? And a lot of it. If they were HP or defense there, I would be so much happier. But unfortunately, that's just how some of these pieces ended up, right? You see here, effectiveness and effect res on that. It's quite sad, quite sad. But otherwise, all of the other substats are pretty much just geared towards damage, and her damage stats are enough to basically kill. Her artifact here, Secret Art Storm Sword, is hers, right? 80% chance to proc an attack boost, an attack buff before she goes and attacks, right? Whenever they do their non-attack skill. So before she procs her passive, that can potentially proc as well. I do want to get that to max limit break at plus 30, just to ensure that she does get the attack buff. But as of right now, it's just we need to work on getting her more bulk. Right here, though, her exclusive equipment, I keep re-rolling these. I keep trying to buy more of these, but I can't seem to get anything more than 8% crit chance on the EE passive that I want. So when she does eventually get her max EE and I can craft it, that'll be 12%, which will bring her up to 100% crit chance. So if you're wondering why she's not 100% there, this thing is the reason why. Alright, so there's Celine right there. Next up we have Bellona. So she used to be really insanely fast for the purposes of defense breaking in defense teams, right? I had her in my arena defense team, I had her in my guild war defense team, but now she's just on a little bit of a pseudo DPS build, right? Pretty high attack, pretty decent crit damage, not 100% crit chance because I use her in PvE more as a debuffer, as a stripper. But we'll get to that in just a bit. Here are her substats, right? Just looking for some damage, looking for some effectiveness. 124 effectiveness is pretty good. It's not bad at all, especially given that I'm running an attack percent ring, not even running effectiveness there. So there we go. Now, talking about stripping, right? I use her in A13, so she, along with Iseria, allow me to strip the rage buff, whatever it is, on the A13 boss, right? So I have that EE going for me. Sometimes though, I do like to bring her, if I want to bring her into Guild Wars or something like that for fun, I would switch her over to the EE that gives her 100% defense break on her S3. And she's currently on Bloodstone for her PvE purposes, just to give my team, A13 team, a little bit more sustain, because sometimes Tamarinne isn't enough against a ton of damage. Alright, so there we go. That's my new and improved DPS Bellona there. Speaking of Iseria from earlier, A13, here we go. I use her in quite a few PvE team comps. She's in Expedition, sometimes use her for raids, sometimes use her in the new C11, right, that new hunt that came out. So that's pretty cool. I'm still trying to figure out a team to bring to that. She has a, very low HP, but a good chunk of defense here, and her effectiveness is good enough for PvE purposes. No real intention of bringing her to PvP. So she's on really random pieces of gear here, and she's on Sachet Atanes because when I do bring her into A13 and you kill the mobs, you get some additional combat readiness, so that's pretty nice. Helps my team cycle through their skills a little bit faster. Alright, next up we have Rin. So Rin here is on counter and she is looking good. I actually have her max imprinted here. Finally got SSS imprint. Very happy about that. And her counter pieces, I mean, not too impressive, right? I'm really lacking in counter gear. I don't ever farm B13 ever. I just don't touch it. I don't have the teams for it. I don't have the units for it. And I kind of don't want to build the units for it. I'm a little lazy in that regard. But we still have the counter pieces that we need from a few crafts here and there, from Hell Raid, from these two pieces right here, and just lucky world boss drops like this one. So yeah, Rin, very, very nice. Love bringing her into PvE. She is fantastic in there, especially Hell Raids, and especially with the, what was that thing called again? The Hall of Trials, right? Hall of Trials, really strong in that mode as well. But in PvP, oh man, the ability to strip on her S1, defense break on her S2, really insane buffs, like greater attack buffs and crit damage buffs, evasion buffs, defense, immunity, all for 3 turns with her S3, makes her a really strong unit. I would love to build her with really fast speed, like 230, 240 speed, just so she can go first, S3, buff units, and then you can just go ham. So that's something I definitely want to look forward to in the future, but for right now, counter set on a healer with Celestine is really good for sustaining. Her EE here, by the way, is the one that dispels debuffs, so she's able to cleanse, like just in case someone, you know, brings a Basar or something, you can't ban the Basar. You can cleanse the unbuffable before you apply your own buffs, so that's just there for utility. Alright, so moving on, we have Roana here. Roana, nothing's really changed about her, swapped a couple pieces around, but ended up lowering her bulk a little bit to maintain her effect res, dropped speed a little bit as well, but kind of had to do, I think, for Diene to keep her effect res up. But yeah, all these pieces pretty much just free gear, right? Everything here is free gear except the ring, which is a really bad ring, by the way, and the weapon, which was also a really bad weapon, by the way. She's on Stella Harpa, just because I didn't really have anything else to put on her. She was on Potion Vial before, but then Tamarinne needed it, so Stella Harpa it is for our Roana. Yeah, I only really draft her against Seaside Bellonas in RTA, so she's not really used all too often. Next up, we have General Purrgis, the king of Wyvern here. Pretty much built full tank, right? Nothing too special, just going to go through his gear so you can see. Off pieces, right? I don't even have a second HP set complete. He's on this immunity piece because he just rolled a bunch of HP. Really good defense, really good health. Love using him in PvP though as well sometimes. As you guys know, I like to bring him against Dark Corvus, or with Dark Corvus. I guess you can bring him against Dark Corvus too, but really good with Dark Corvus in order to tank and be a light bait. His EE here just gives additional combat readiness whenever your team's hit. Really just used for Wyvern in that regard. But yeah, there we go. That's General Purrgis. Next up, the new and improved buffed Little Queen Charlotte here. Yeah, very, very strong unit. I've loved using her. You guys will definitely see Guild War videos of her coming out, and I'm testing her out in RTA as well, but these are stats I currently have on her, and I am so happy with that splash damage she now has on her S3, so I have so much more attack on her. She's still not on immunity. I don't really need immunity on her with the comps that I usually bring her into. You're not bringing her debuff comps, right? So, and you know, by the time she takes her first turn, she should have immunity from her S1. So those are the stats on her gear. Plus 30 portrait. She could have even more stats if I, you know, I-90'd this ring, but it's not a really great ring, so I'm kind of holding off on it in that regard. But 4,000 attack, man, she is able to smash through FCCs with this crit damage, and the splash damage that results from it can kill, like, almost kill Spectre Tenebria's, Rylets, and things like that. So really, really happy with how she's turned out. Her S1 got buffed in terms of damage as well. It's actually quite noticeable, so it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Alright, moving on here, we have Crimson Armin, who is supposed to be on Aureus, but I've been farming friendship on her. As you can see, she's almost friendship 10, because I made a mistake, or what some people would consider a mistake, with plus 15ing her way back in the day. But I have no regrets. I use her way too often for me to not give her the love that she deserves. So, really tanky stats here, 20k HP, 1400 defense. Her speed was lowered a bit. She's only 205 speed now, but that's alright. She always goes before the opponent's DPSs anyway. And for DPSs that are faster, usually like Rylets and stuff, they're single target and they'll only attack her anyway, which is fine. She can withstand hits from those types of units. Her main goal is just to protect the rest of the team, right? She has a little bit of effect res, which really doesn't ever come up because I don't bring her into dedicated debuffers. Plus, she gives herself immunity anyway, just to extend from her immunity set with her S3. So she's never going to get debuffed. But yeah, there we go. Crimson Armin, fairly basic, fairly standard build there on some leftover pieces. Next up, we have, not Celeste, she's not really used or fully built there. We have my F Lidica. Oh my god, don't you love that skin? I know I do. So she's SSS imprinted because Lidica loves me, apparently. Shows up way too often in my polls. But here we go. Defensive stats are pretty good. She actually has pretty decent survivability. And her speed went up from my previous video, I believe. I don't remember exactly what her stats were, but back up to almost 270 speed again, which is very nice, especially because I rolled a really sick weapon. Her effectiveness is still pretty high up there, used for strips. So here's the weapon that I recently rolled, 21 speed on it, very nice, and pretty good substats as well, right? I can't complain about things like that. So, pretty nice. Yeah, mostly just going for effectiveness and speed on all of her pieces. As you can tell, the helmet 15 speed after reforge kind of sucks. 13 speed after reforge definitely sucks on the chest piece. She could be so much better, but I just cannot, for the life of me, roll speed on speed sets. And yeah, the rest of the stats: crit chance on her necklace, effectiveness on her ring, fairly standard, and some bulk on her boots. She's running Song of Stars now. I actually changed her artifact over. I think she was running, what was it called? I was running Achates on her to boost up my team as I was cleaving, but because I have a new unit who's actually holding on to that right now, I switched over to Song of Stars so she can actually help add more utility and more damage to my fights, right? That target debuff is very good. And the thing about artifacts is that even if you miss when you attack, artifacts can still land as long as you have enough effectiveness. So by hitting, Rylets with S1 or S3 and putting a target debuff on him actually opens him up to a much higher chance of getting hit by whatever DPS that comes after my Lidica. So there you guys go there. Next up, we have the unit that stole my Lidica's Achates, Watcher Schuri. That's right. I actually built up Watcher Schuri, and it's mostly for speed imprint right here, right? Plus 10 speed for the entire team, which is very nice. I have him molded for his S3 here, for obviously nuking with his damage. And here are his stats. So I have him on really random destruction pieces. These are the ones that Kayron used to use, right? And I figured, hey, you know what? Why not just give him a shot, see how he goes? I do need a speed imprints because I contest speed quite a bit now in RTA with how I like to cleave. He's on speed boots, as you can see right here. Not a full dedicated attack build, but he still does so much, like 15,000 damage with his S3, right? Even at these really low stats for offensive purposes. But he's used to clean up. I have him on speed boots because I need him to be able to get pushed up by like Lidica and Cdom to be kind of near the top where he can go after my main cleaver and just nuke down whatever's left over, right? They might have brought an ML Krau, they might have an Ice Krau Ruele or something like that that I just need to snipe to make sure they don't deal damage to my team. Again, Achates is on him because he is usually there if I'm speed contesting, and this extra combat readiness after I kill somebody is very nice for pushing up my team and keeping the cycles going. Alright, so there we go. That's Watcher Schuri there. Benevolent Romann. So here we go. 258 speed. This is the reason why Flan is at 248 speed. Speed tuning is very important for debuff units. So what we have here is basically just just silence the opponents, right? Silence them and we're good. He's on a Unity set. As you can see, some of the Unity pieces swapped around. I think I got this Unity chest piece. He had a good Unity weapon, but in order for me to maintain the speed set, I had to break that and put this Unity chest piece here. His speed substats aren't the best. They're not, great or anything, but he has enough effectiveness to debuff everything and strip everything. The Unity set actually does help him quite a bit because his S1 is what procs all of his pushbacks and things like that, so he's actually pretty fun to use on the Unity set. 9% chance for dual attacks there, by the way. And he is on Abyssal Crown. I kind of wish I didn't merge my second copy into this one, but oh well. I need to buy more copies. I definitely need more copies of Abyssal Crown. It's such a good artifact, especially for units like Broman. So yeah, there we go. Nothing really much to say about him. He is actually quite bulky in terms of defense. Kind of wish it was HP though instead of defense, but had to go for the speed here, so unfortunate. Alright, next up we have Ruele. So for the tanky comps here, we have Ruele with really good defensive substats and pretty good effect res to boot. No wasted stats and crit chance, crit damage, or effectiveness. Really happy about that, actually. It's pretty good. So here are all her substats, pretty much all catered towards HP, defense, speed, and effect resistance, right? No wasted substats whatsoever. Maybe a little bit into attack, but that's unavoidable. Okay, and we have Water's Origin for her artifact here, just to help her kind of sustain herself a little bit, right? Because she's a single target healer, and her cooldowns aren't really, you know, the shortest that they could possibly be. So having some way to mitigate a bit of damage by healing a bit back and boosting combat readiness to cut between, you know, certain important cleanup units, right? Let's say someone tries to cleave you, they fail to cleave your Ruele, you might be able to boost their combat readiness before a cleanup unit like Watcher Schuri or something goes, and then you can heal up, you can revive, you can do whatever you need to do with her. Alright, so that's pretty standard Ruele. We're going to move on into my new CDOM, or not CDOM, Commander Lorina. So Commander Lorina here dropped her attack by quite a bit, increased her bulk by quite a bit as well. And yeah, her crit chance doesn't really matter because Luluca has that artifact that boosts crit chance. Crit damage fell by a little bit too, so overall her damage output's lower, but her survivability went through the roof, and she is really, really strong now in terms of autoing and not dying. So as you can see, I purposely put her on some really garbage gear, right? 24% defense, like no one's ever going to use this, but had enough attack and crit chance that I considered putting it on her, and it worked out well. 1000 defense, 11k HP is pretty good to survive on auto. So again, the rest of her pieces are all just free attack sets, right? Nothing too special here. Daydream Joker, because I only use her in PvE, but man, does she destroy and melt away bosses in Hell Raid. Speaking of melting opponents away, though, we have Daddy Corvus over here. Still haven't molded his S2 because yeah, I should probably do that, right? Okay, but here we go. Nothing's really changed about him. Still on HP set, still on a little resist set for a little bit of effect res there. Boosting him up to a little over 100. He almost got walled out by a 22k HP Momo, if you've watched a recent Guild War video about that. So if you want to make sure that you can smash through really tanky healers and such, you might want to put him on Portrait. However, I have him on Strat Gauntlet for the effect res here, so it brings him up to over 150 effect res, so he's not getting, you know, provoked, stunned, and things like that by random DPS units and such. Alright, there's absolutely no chance that that would happen. Alright, so pretty standard Dark Corvus there. Next up, ML Ken actually reworked him just a little bit. As you can see, I broke his attack set, which actually hurt his attack quite a bit, but it's still in a pretty good spot. As long as his attack's over 3,500, he works for my purposes, which is usually to sustain against teams that are trying to cleave or have squishier units and such. He is so good with higher defense and higher HP. As you can see here, 1,500 defense, almost 16,000 HP. Very, very strong. I don't care about crit chance. He's too slow to really care about cycling turns. And I would like to get his crit damage higher, but as of right now, to keep his bulk, I cannot afford any more damage stats because my pieces just absolutely refuse to roll crit damage, as you can see, right? So this one here rolled one time into crit damage. This piece here avoided crit damage like the plague. This chest piece here avoided crit damage. I mean, it hit it once for one roll, but otherwise I avoided it. Pretty good necklace, actually. Good defense on his necklace. This ring here hit crit damage a couple times. It's not the best, but it's not the worst. And this one here, yeah, low roll into crit damage. So as you can see, we're lacking quite a bit in terms of crit damage here. But these two new free immunity pieces actually helped quite a bit boost up his stats. He's on a Sigrid Scythe here that needs to be max limit broken. It's almost there. I just need to enhance it. I just don't have the gold for that right now. But yeah, very, very strong unit. Absolutely love him. Okay, moving on, we have Arbiter Vildred. So, actually, I've improved my Arbiter Vildred stats. I know, surprising, right? It's been so long since I changed his gear, but he's even stronger now. So, almost 4,000 attack, still maintaining his bulk. I really wanted to ensure that he had 1,000 defense and at least 10k HP, because it comes up so often where he's, you know, just there, right? Maybe the opponent ended up killing everyone else. He's still alive. Or people are trying to kill him, but he just won't die. He just refuses to die. If you have Aureus, if you have Adamant on your team in RTA and you draft Arbiter Vildred, he's just there. He's not going to go down easily, especially with this bulk, right? So he's going to be a constant threat. I want to get a max limit broken Alexis Basket. I want to plus 30 this, but unfortunately just don't have the artifacts. I need to pull more copies of it, or at least wait for it to come back into Powder Shop for me to get that. But yeah, otherwise, fairly standard Arbiter Vildred, not much to say about him here. Next up, we have ML Rin, one of my absolute favorite units in the game, and man, is she contesting for speed. So what we have here is a 288 speed ML Rin. She could be faster, but I chose not to in favor of some more effectiveness. But she is going to usually contest things like, what's her name? Is it Celine or... No, it's not Celine. Cerise, there we go. She counters Cerise very hard, and ever since Cerise got her buffs, I've been needing to draft ML Rin a little bit more to counter that, right? So as you can tell, she pretty much has all of my fastest speed substat pieces, right? I don't have many pieces above 20 speed, and I don't have many effectiveness rings that have very high speed either, if you probably might have noticed from all my other debuffers. But if I can get this ring up, like I would, oh my god, if my Rin can hit 300 speed, I'd be so happy. But yeah, trash stats on things like boots, but we're just trying to get that effectiveness stat up. She's on RNL, which is actually pretty good for granting extra turns, cycling through her S2, which is very important actually for keeping units stun locked. She's so fast that she cycles her turns so quickly, and against slower units and teams that can't cleanse, you're going to have a unit just absolutely locked down. Basically what Fire Lidica does, right? Although one thing you do have to keep in mind is that now that Guiding Light has been buffed, you know, people's Flidicas and stuff, maybe Cerise's as well, can be untouchable, right, by ML Rins, because she doesn't have any AoE skills, but she is still a great stripper. Her S3 and S2 both strip, so she's really good against Kayrons and such as well. But yeah, there we go. That's Crescent Moon Rin. Next up, we have Briarwitch Iseria, which I haven't really been using all too often. However, she is still a pretty strong unit. What I use her for is a debuffer. So I know a lot of people have been watching my Guild Wars and go like, oh my god, your Iseria hits like a noodle. What the heck? Why are you even using her? But I actually find that her debuffs are really, really strong. The strip that she has on her S3, the attack down, the unbuffables. I wish that they were 100% chance, but honestly, 85 is good enough. Against units like Kayron, all you gotta do is land that unbuffable, and you win, right? He just goes down, he dies. There's nothing that he can do about it. So I use her mostly as a Kayron counter. I don't really use her for much else. She is actually a pretty good opening stripper for slower teams, right? If I don't want my opponent to like freak out with me bringing in a Broman or Flidica, I can actually opt for a Briarwitch Iseria, and most people won't know if she's on an effectiveness build or if she's on an attack build, right? Here I have Wall of Order, Landy's artifact for her, and it's alright. I mean, she's usually going to be the opening turn, right? Against things like FCCs, I guess, I have a chance of proccing greater attack. Doesn't really matter too much. But I really don't have any other artifacts to put on her at the moment, and the extra combat readiness is not too bad for cycling her skills. But yeah, moving on here, we have Oxlots. So, Oxlots, I had him on immunity, actually. He used to be on immunity, but I took him off of it. Here are his random pieces of gear that I slapped on him. I don't really use him all too often, but he is there for Guild Wars. He is there to bait bans sometimes. People don't like fighting against Oxlots, apparently. But yeah, he's very slow. 243. He's basically just fast enough for me to go first in Guild Wars, pop up whatever DPS I need, and then they will do their job. I'm trying to get more speed pieces because, as you can tell, I'm building up a ton of units with a bunch of speed. I have Rose now. I have Flan. All these units that want speed, and unfortunately, Oxlots just, I don't have enough uses for him at the moment in RTA for me to justify giving him more than this. If I were to take him into RTA, ideally he'd have immunity. Slower Oxlots would definitely benefit from immunity. But yeah, Tagahel's Ancient Book to help soul burn my DPS units. That's pretty much it. Don't really use him too often, but I would, if I got more speed on him, I would. Alright, moving on. Next we have Cdom here. So Cdom looking pretty strong. High defense. Would like her HP to be higher, but unfortunately I just don't have the means of doing that right now. But pretty much looking for crit damage on all of her pieces, as we can see. Her crit chance is about 50%. I don't really use her to, like, I don't really bring her into things that can strip buffs or make me unbuffable, so that is usually why I don't really care about having low crit chance. There are benefits to having more crit chance in the case that you're against a what is her name? Celine, right? The one that counters off of non-attack skill. So Celine, you might want to tap Celine, right, with a Cdom. If you have like 100% crit chance, you have a chance of just one-shotting her without using her S3, and you can use her S3 to push up your team on the subsequent turn. So that's something that you can keep in mind with in terms of drafting Cdom. She's kind of risky because a lot of people are building up their Celines due to her EE now, but for me personally, I don't really care because I have Bastion on my Rose, and Bastion with Arbiter Vildred means that Arbiter Vildred is not dying, especially my defensive stats on him make it so that Celine has a pretty hard time killing him. Alright, so moving on here, we have Angelica to wrap things up. Angelica here, you don't care about any stat other than speed and maybe effect res. So my effect res is fairly low. I have her imprinted for attack for the team instead of self-imprint here. I don't feel like she needs that extra effect res. There's no reason to bring her into, teams that are going to strip you anyway. You're going to go first and you're going to cleave with her, or at least snipe down the units that have extinction. She is on Shimadra Staff, which does give her a little bit of effect res, but brings her up to about 250. But 248 speed, very, very fast for Angelica, and does what she needs to do, right? Goes first, attack buffs the team, prevents Arbiter Vildred from reviving, and that's that. So that's pretty much going to be it for her. And speaking of which, that's probably going to be it for this video. So thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. Starting to lose my voice a little, but it's all right. Now you guys know all of the stats on my units, and you can reference them if you are curious on, ways that you can build your own. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, subscribe for more Epic 7 content, and leave a comment down below. Let me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.